One of the things that distinguishes me from other parapsychologists is that I was a neuroscientist for 15 years. I'm a neuropsychiatrist trained in neurology, psychiatry, internal medicine, and it wasn't until after I had that background in the materialist model and I saw that it had flaws in it that I started to look for explanations elsewhere. And some of the flaws that I saw were in the model were ones that were coming from the fact that you had clinicians in the field interviewing patients who had, for example, brain damage, such as frontotemporal dementia, in which you have an erosion of the brain. And yet, instead of these people being more impaired, you would actually have these remarkable abilities appear. You have people like autistic savants who have disabilities to the extent that they can't even do simple daily tasks. They can't even do the basic building blocks of language or mathematics, and yet they can come up with these answers to things that it just doesn't make sense. And so when I was looking at these phenomena that I saw as a clinician, and then had this background as a neuroscientist, I was in the position, which most people are not. Most neuroscientists don't know what clinicians see in the field, and most clinicians in the field don't really know neuroscience well enough to know whether the model could explain it. And so I have been in that position to really look at the two. And so when I look at a lot of parapsychological research, what I see missing is our brain in it. You know, what is the human brain doing that allows us to have these experiences? So, almost 9 years ago to the day, I presented at a conference in Copenhagen towards the Science of Consciousness. It's a conference that's sponsored by the University of Arizona. It's in the U.S. and then it's also in other countries every other year, so they switch between international and U.S. conference. And so I was presenting at the Copenhagen conference, and I presented on autistic savants because at the time I realized that they were a key to understanding human consciousness because of the abilities they had. And at the time, I was trying to see, can we understand how they can do these things, such as pick out prime numbers in 6 digits without knowing how to do math? You know, is there some way in which they're able to pick up on some pattern recognition, you know, that's out there that we're not able to pick up on, but somehow they're tuning into that pattern recognition. And so I was working on a model for understanding that with my brother, who's a theoretical physicist and an artificial intelligence expert, to see, can we explain this? So if you had a quantum computer, could a quantum computer do this? And when it comes to things like calendar calculations, for example, the autistic savants who can do things not only like tell you, if you say my birthday is May 12th, 1962, tell you whether that's a Tuesday or a Friday, but also be able to tell you something like, if you said to them, what year had 3 Fridays the 13th in it, they would be able to name the years. So they're doing something in terms of they're accessing information about our calendar system, but these are people who don't know math. And the algorithm for deriving calendar calculation, that kind of thing, is very complicated. And these people can't even do addition. And mathematicians ask the same question, who even have algorithms, take longer to do it than autistic savants. And so the more I started to delve into this phenomena with autistic savants, the more I said, you know, these things that some of them can do, okay, we could explain some of it by really having superior visual spatial skills and pattern recognition and superior memories. But some of these skills that they have really look like psi, because when you ask them phenomenologically, what do you experience? They say, I don't know how I have the answer, it just pops into my head. So it's very different from what I, as someone who trained as a mathematician, I was a math prodigy, and the answers didn't just pop into my head. So I knew that what they were doing was very different. And I thought, so it's so psi-like, what if it is psi? So I started focusing on them as a population, and when I started to look at the literature, I saw that occasionally you would have someone like Daryl Treffert, who wrote a book about them, Extraordinary People. In his book, he talks about psi-like, not just psi-like abilities, but actual psi. He talks about research that was done by someone whose name was Bernard Rimland, who was someone who had an autistic son, and he also founded the Autistic Research Institute in San Diego, and he studied thousands of children. And he concluded that some of them definitely had psi. There was a child who could predict when his parents were going to pick him up, and they didn't pick him up from where he was during the day on a regular basis. It was, sometimes they did, sometimes he went by bus, but he always would go to the door knowing when they would pick him up. There was another child who knew what her Christmas presents were a week in advance without any clues. But the point is that there was evidence also that they might also have things that we think of as psi. Not only were their abilities something that seemed psi-like, but they also might actually have psi. But what I saw was that when Daryl Treffert suggested this just briefly, it was attacked so vehemently that it just basically went underground. And so I started to look at, in my book, The ESP Enigma, I looked at what is it that makes some people more predisposed to having these experiences than other people.